Thanks for joining us again for a very special episode 126. In this episode of the Clive Barker podcast, along with special guest Ben Warren, Ryan, that's me, and Jose, we tackle Clive's most ambitious and important novel, Imajica. This is one we've been looking forward to for years, and Ben Warren even composed some music to go along with one of his favorite parts, and you can find that at the end, so don't stop it right at the end because we've got something special there. We hope that we did it justice, but feel free to comment your thoughts about Imajica on the website, Facebook, or Twitter, and we'll make sure to add it to our next episode. This episode is sponsored by Jordy Calendar, spelled Jorte. Jordy is a customizable calendar and journaling app for both iOS and Android. So if you're already using Apple or Google Calendar, Jordy can sync those events, and you can follow cool stuff like sports or news, or for people like us, there's horror, like Shock Till You Drop. You can even add the weather forecast. Your stuff is backed up in Jordy Cloud, so you don't have to worry about losing your data switching devices. It's free to download from the App Store, but you can help them know that you got it from us if you use the custom URL, and this is pretty cool. Bit.ly, bit, http://bit.ly, bit.ly/ all one word, pinhead calendar. So bit.ly/ pinhead calendar, and they'll know that you got it from us. So give it a try. It's free to download, and try it out and see if it works for you. And we thank Bit.ly for their support of the Clive Barker podcast. So, welcome back to the Clive Barker podcast, and we have with us our special guest, Ben Warren.
Yeah, first of all, our fundraiser 3, Hell on Earth, we had a reward tier, which was to help us plan an episode of the podcast, and it also included a T-shirt and the podcast episodes on the USB flash drive. So there were 3 backers. One of them was Don Bertram, who we've done an episode about Clive Barker's artwork. And there was another one who only wanted to contribute, which we appreciate. Roger Beckett, yeah. Yeah, thank you, Roger. And the third one was you, Ben. So thank you very much for supporting our podcast. And it's of course, the theme is Imajica, which was one of my favorite books ever, and definitely my favorite Clive Barker book. Thank you for picking that one.
That's quite right. It's my favorite book as well. And I had no hesitation in supporting the podcast whatsoever. It's you guys do a great job. And to get the opportunity to be involved as well and talk about Imajica, yeah, absolutely. I was definitely down with that.
Well, we're glad to have you. And I think, when was the first time that you read Imajica? Was it when it first came out?
No, I was quite late to the Clive Barker party. I don't think I read it until probably the late 90s. Oh. So yeah, I was probably in my late teens when I first came across it. I think I'd read Weave World previously, and that absolutely blew me away. And someone had mentioned, Imajica is like that, turned up to 11, and it was a real experience reading it. So absolutely love the book, and we really enjoyed a second chance to revisit it recently in advance of the podcast.
Absolutely. I also read Imajica later than 91. I think in 93 I visited Canada for the summer. That was my first time flying. So I went there and I bought Cabal. It was my first Clive Barker novel. But by that time I already had seen Hellraiser. I knew about Nightbreed. I had read some comics of both. And so I knew who Clive Barker was. And then I just started, when I came back to Portugal, I started importing Clive Barker's books from a British bookstore in Porto. They were pretty expensive, but I scrimped and saved, whatever I could to buy the Books of Blood. Then I think I moved to the Great and Secret Show in Weave World. I may have bought Imajica in 95. I read it through in about 3 weeks. It was pretty amazing. It was probably the first book with a giant mythology that I had ever read at that point. And it kind of crystallized in me the idea that fantasy literature is at its core the creation of a world, and that Clive had created a world I wanted desperately to live in. Even with all the scary stuff, the miraculous element of it was so seductive and appealing. The magic, the landscapes, the promises of life beyond the trivial and the mundane. Just waiting behind the veil that you could just cross was extremely enticing. I was completely hooked. I had never read Lord of the Rings. To be honest, I only got interested in Lord of the Rings after the movies, which is kind of, I guess I have to hand out my geek card because I hadn't read Lord of the Rings at that point. That just came later. So I had some Dungeons and Dragons books for kids, and I collected Finding Fantasy books. So that was my core when it came to fantasy. But of course, this was what Clive defined as the fantastique. So that was like my introduction to this genre.
For me, I had just watched Nightbreed, and seeing the opening with Clive Barker talking about monsters and just having a general sort of enthusiasm for his own work kind of got me really interested in Clive Barker. So I went out and bought a paperback of Cabal. I bought a couple of more paperbacks, including Imajica, and then I went but I hadn't read Imajica yet, and I went to the book signing for Imajica, which was that was my very first one. I had just a couple of paperbacks for him to sign, and I think I bought a couple like right there on the spot. I think I bought the Books of Blood there. But it was kind of overwhelming for me, really, but really cool. And I think that the first time that I read Imajica, I was in high school, and it kind of went over my head a little bit, and I had trouble keeping, and I've said this a lot of times on the podcast, so I apologize, but I had trouble keeping track of the characters and trying to figure out, okay, why are we talking about Cutner Dowd? What has he got to do with these other characters, with Pio Pa? And for a long time in the story, it takes a little while to see the connections between all these characters, and I have pretty bad, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and I wasn't able to stay focused enough to put it all together.
I see. I see.
And I think, I don't know if I've read it, I may have read it a second time, but it feels like I really was able to kind of click into it this time around.
Yeah, when I was going through it the second time, I was amazed at how quickly it just throws you straight into everything. Within a few pages, you know what the Imajica is. You know about the 5 Dominions. You're in a car with the dad on the way to meet Pio Pa. It's it really does. It just kicks off and doesn't really let up. Just keeps on going.
Yeah. For example, the whole book it kind of takes place for about a year, because it starts off close to, I think, Christmas, and then it ends a little after Christmas of the next year. So I guess Clive likes to make stories that have these like auspicious dates. Mm-hmm. For example, the Lost Souls, that story with Harry D'Amour, which is kind of like his first story. It takes place in the days preceding Christmas and stuff like that. So in Clive's mythology, so to speak, dates also seem to have like a lot of importance, especially because they're like magical. They represent these magical times when anything can happen and planets align. And for example, in this book, and also there's a lot of parallels with being Christmas and the whole messianic aspect of Gentle, who will find out later that he's more than just a man. He's a very special, he's a very special son, very loved son. And so Clive Barker had an original. The first tentative title for this was A Traveler's Journey Across the 5 Dominions, I think. That was the working title for this book. And then it became Imajica. So
I think also, if you look at this messianic stuff, somebody could write a whole book about just the fact that Jesus as the failed reconciler. I mean, I've been thinking a lot about that since going through the book this time. I did the audiobook, so I feel weird saying reading, but But this idea of Jesus being a failed reconciler, it's almost like Jesus himself had a good message and was a good person, but the way that his religion has been twisted into sort of this patriarchal system of, dogma and
celibate men.
Yeah, patriarchy. It's kind of like doing his father's will, which is a theme throughout throughout Imajica too. I'm doing my father's work, and then you find out later, he had a mother too, and he doesn't realize it, and Hepexamendios probably didn't plan on it, but he's also doing his mother's work.
Right, because there's a side of there's the god and there's the goddesses, and then at one point in the book, it is said that the reason why Hepexamendios did what he did was because he believed that it was easier for people to just pray to one god, to just ask one god for salvation, to just be able to focus on one instead of having multiple gods. And that's why Hepexamendios decided that he would be that god and he would destroy all the other gods in his big pilgrimage through the dominions. Yeah. And by this point, if you guys haven't figured it out, I hope you guys have read the book before you're listening to this, because even though we're going to try not to go too much into the plot or spoil the book too much, because it's truly an amazing book, I just want you guys to know that if you haven't read it, please go read the book. I know it's a little intimidating. I think the hardcover is 825 pages.
Yeah.
My paperback is over 1,100 pages. So,
and the audiobook is 37 hours.
Wow. Yeah. So it starts with a very interesting opening line. It brings up this fictitious playwright called Ploutherokexos, who almost sounds like an Aberathian name. It reminds me a lot of Aberath when I read this. And he was a dramatist of the Second Dominion. And basically what he does here, immediately he dismantles the idea of the happy ending. So right off the bat, he tells us that there is no happy ending. Even though they say, the prince and the princess lived happily ever after. Okay, that's where you choose to end the story, but that's not where the story ends. After that, the prince and princess will get married and have kids and have arguments, and then they'll get old and then eventually die. And it's kind of like a foreshadowing of that's just life. Even though sometimes not everything is a happy ending, but the journey is the most important, I guess.
And it's almost that quote, I think, is almost a reminder that yes, at least for me, seeing this, it's kind of like, yes, there are a lot of people and a lot of characters to keep track of in this book, but don't worry, stay with me, because it's going to get simpler, and you're going to understand who the main characters are if you just stick with it. This book
wasn't accompanied by the amount of artwork that Clive Barker has done, for example, for books like Aberat. But can you imagine if this book had as many paintings as Clive made for the Aberat, how epic this would be? This would be amazing.
That would be absolutely superb.
Yeah, I wish we could see more sketches, and I don't know if Clive has any sketches of some of these Dominion landscapes and stuff, but I do know that there is an Imajica card game. Have you guys ever, I know, Ryan, you have the full collection, but Ben, have you ever played that Imajica card game? Or
I've never played it. I've got a couple of double starter decks just on my bookshelf. Again, I came to the party too late to really get into the game or into the serious collecting of it. But I love looking through those cards, and some of the artwork on there is fantastic. And the artwork that Richard Kirk did, of course, in the expanded edition with the appendices, they're unbelievable. You think that you can picture these insane characters and monsters and landscapes in your head, and then you see that and you think, wow, that's working on another level. Like his Nulliniac is one of my favorite pieces of art for Imajica. It's incredible.
It's very striking, and for example, it's funny because When I look at these Richard Kirk illustrations, and I look at the cradle of I don't know how to pronounce it, but Cherzamit, and I look at this Jekka Jek, and all these like creatures that he came up with. Most of them are really how I envisioned them. Like Clive is such a good narrator and such a good, his descriptions are so easy to visualize that I was surprised that they're very, very close to what I imagined. And that, like we were talking about the Imajica card game, it's great to have all those paintings put a face to some of these characters and see how close they got to it. And Ryan, you have the full deck, right?
The
full collection.
I've been collecting them. I've been collecting them since maybe 2010, and finally, just only a few months ago, I got the last card that I needed, and it's kind of made me feel a little bit like Gentle. Because this book that I forgot, I forgot everything about Imajica, but I've been sort of putting the pieces together as I collect all these cards and put them in the little sleeve, in alphabetical order, and seeing all these characters, and then reading the book again. It's like it all came back to me.
Yeah.
So I think. And I've never played the game, and I've played like Magic the Gathering with my brother a few times because he liked that game. But for me, it was just more about collecting than playing.
It's Clive Barker was really at the peak of his form when he started writing Imajica. I think this book was one of the last things that he wrote while he was still in England. In fact, I think I remember him mentioning in interviews that he wrote a lot of this book almost in an empty house, so he had no distractions. And in a interview that he gave to Fangoria in January of '92, he mentioned that Imajica took 14 months from the time I first pen to paper until the day I turned it in. That was writing 7 days a week, 14 hours a day. Towards the end, it was 16 hours a day. So it's probably like the most prolific writing that Clive Barker ever did.
And going back to that Richard Kirk edition, for me that was kind of a nasty trick because I'm walking around in the bookstore, and like I always do, I would go look for Clive Barker, and I saw that Imajica 2, and I'm like, wait, not only is there an Imajica 2, but it never even went into hardcover. It just went straight to paperback. What's going on? And then I opened it up and I'm like, hey, that was a nasty trick. And so I never bought it. I never really got a good chance to look at all the illustrations in it. But I think Richard Kirk is a great illustrator. I love his stuff in Maximilian Bacchus and in the Weave World 25th anniversary.
Oh yeah,
collector's edition.
Yeah, I didn't have quite the same level of disappointment as you were thinking that it was a Magica 2, but I was really excited about the appendices and thinking, well, that's going to expand upon this amazing mythology that he's put together. And then when I got it, it's just a glossary of names and who these people are and the places they go to. So there wasn't really anything new there. It was interesting to kind of remind myself of who these people were and what was going on. But I was kind of hoping for like a Tolkien-esque appendices where you get a whole load more information about what's behind the story.
One thing, this is not like super high philosophy or anything, but I was wondering if you guys know why Oscar Godolphin and Charlie Esterbrook have different last names if they're brothers.
I think maybe because Estabrook took like his mother's name or something. I guess that would happen sometimes, right?
I did it. I don't know.
It's a good question. I have no idea. I'd never thought to even question.
Yeah. I didn't either until this time around. And then
that's an interesting question, though. I think I don't remember exactly if that's ever explained, but I would think that was probably because, Oscar was more of the rambunctious, adventurous guy who actually trumped his older brother, I think, in becoming a member of the Tabula Rasa, because their father didn't think that Charlie could deal with the whole thing of secrets and become a member of the Tabula Rasa. So maybe to show a duality between the two brothers, maybe Estabrook would have picked the maiden name of his mother or something. Just my idea.
Yeah. Well, and he didn't even have much of a clue about what the Tabula Rasa was.
Mm-hmm.
And reading this book, if you go back to the first time you read it, did you think that the Tabula Rasa was going to be this big, big conflict or a big enemy that Gentle would have to deal with? I kind of thought, it's the Tabula Rasa. They don't like magic, and Gentle is the Reconciler. We're going to have a big problem. And then it ended up kind of that they got sort of taken care of in another way.
Well, they're kind of like the reactionary response to the failure of the reconciliation 200 years ago, right? It went so wrong that the only sane response, or the only response that could preserve sanity for some of the people who were there, was to completely deny anything that had to do with magic. And so that's when the Tabula Rasa was started. It was like, enforce the status quo, forget about magic. We don't want anybody doing magic. We're happy the way we are. That's their gray stoic facade. I mean, even the tower, Roxborough Tower, is a perfect example of the banality of the Tabula Rasa. It's like, it's hidden behind some trees. It's gray. It's nondescript. Nobody cares about it. It only gets circulars in the mail, and it's just a place of secrets, a tomb for secrets, I would say.
Yeah, and suppressing magic, or suppressing the imaginative streak in a person, or explaining why there's no magic in the world anymore is sort of a recurring theme in Clive Barker books.
Mm-hmm. Usually the side that does magic or practices magic or supports it is the very creative, chaotic side. It's the side that's got color and life, and they're vibrant with power. And then there's the Tabula Rasa, which is just this place like, no, let's just gather up in a room and smoke and drink and talk about how we can suppress like any sort of uprising in the magic circles. But then when you go to Scarlet Gospels, you find out that, and here comes my unified theory of Clive Barker. When you go to Scarlet Gospels, there's a circle of magicians in the world, right? That's being picked off one by Pinhead.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of the opposite image of the Tabula Rasa in a way, right?
Yeah, he wants to take it all for himself.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd never made that connection until we started talking about the Tabula Rasa, and then I was thinking, I would have loved to have known more about, what they were doing when they were, going around murdering all these people connected to magic, because it's really just a footnote in Imajica that this is going on while the main story is happening. And just when I was thinking about that, then it kind of, that connection was made. It's like, oh yeah, say it's similar to what Pinhead was doing in the Scarlet Gospels, going around killing the magicians. But yeah, like you're right, is keeping it for himself rather than just getting rid of it altogether.
And
exactly.
And murdering the Shoal in the books of the art, right? The Kissoon killing the members of the Shoal, so that the Ead can come in and invade our world without any resistance.
Mm-hmm. There's some elements that keep repeating itself, but they're always used, and they are always revisited in a very imaginative way, in a way that makes them something bigger and not just copies of each other. These elements, they have these echoes, but I always think that they're very, very original when these things come up.
It feels like Clive Barker's trying really hard to get closer and closer to the truth of something that is important to him, and so that's why these themes recur. Aberrat is really similar to Imajica, and you've got a little girl who's got a secret sort of history inside of her that she doesn't understand, and she travels the islands of the Aberrat to learn more about herself.
Yeah. And another element that's always recurring in Clive Barker's work is the presence of the feminine as the nurturing, the side that nurtures and raises things, and whereas the male side is usually the destroyer, the conqueror, But in this book, I think he marries both of them together really well. You have not only, the masculine side of Hypexamendios, which destroyed everything and wanted to keep everything to himself, but you have the redemption of the masculine side in Gentle, which he's also a nurturer. He heals the dominions. He reconciles all 5 dominions. So in a way, he kind of redeems the destruction and the separation that Hypexamendios performed. And then, of course, there's the goddesses.
And I think that also the thing that sort of suppresses or sort of shapes his feeling or his femininity, I guess, would be Pio Pa, right? I mean, he, as a Mistiff, they never say he. It's an it. Pio Pa is male and female, depending on who's looking at him, and he's got parts that can shift and change, and that being the rarest and most important creature, almost in the Imajica, being Gentle's spouse, I think played a big part in that.
Right. I have to say one of the parts that I found a little hard to get through in the book was, and again, spoilers, but at some point in the book, I wasn't sure. I mean, I knew that, Gentle and Pi were together and they were probably going to stay together. But then after what happens to Pio Pa in the last act of the book, I was still wondering, is him and Judith going to get together at the end? And it was kind of like a little not painful, but a little like, I can't explain the feeling when he discovers that Judith is pregnant with Sertori's child, and then at the end they kind of meet, and Gentle is alone, but Judith has her baby, Huzzah, that was born from Sertori, and it was kind of like a little sad to see them not get together. But then I realized, oh wait, this isn't over, you know, and it became a lot better. But at that point, I thought, what's going to happen here? I thought they were going to get together at the end, and apparently they don't. But yeah, so some of the parts that I really, really enjoyed in the book, some of the moments I thought were more emotional for me, is one of them is, and there's all these like little moments that parallel each other in the beginning of the book and at the end. For example, when Gentle is chasing Pi down Fifth Avenue, I think, and he chases him, and they stop on opposite sides of the road, and then they start talking to each other, and there's this feeling that the road between them is almost like a rushing river, and they're kind of yelling at each other. And then at the end here, there's another moment where Clive describes the feat that Pio Pa did to the maestro to make him forget himself, that he says, create a river that will stand between who I am and what I did. And so you kind of get that parallel thing. Oh, so he's referring to that feeling of the river between them. And then, you know, it's interesting. But one of the moments I found more emotional for me was, of all things, the death of Taylor in the book. It's always a moment that I actually posted about. And it always makes me very emotional when I read this, because of how poignant it is, you know, how emotional it is when you know, it's someone who's dying and they want to have the knowledge that they're going to be able to fly off and understand everything after they die. And then Gentle goes out to get cigarettes, and when he comes back, the moment is gone, and Taylor is dead, and Judith is on the sidewalk, and she says, oh, he just passed away, and they just hug each other crying. That moment always gets to me. It's one of the few moments in a book that actually can move me a little bit to tears, and I'm not afraid. I'm not ashamed to say it, that this moment is one of the ones that gets to me the most.
And Ben, anytime if you want to jump in, you know, feel free. We both talk a lot, so sorry about that.
No, that's quite right. To be honest, I don't. It's an odd position to be in, that I've volunteered to do a massive podcast about a massive book I'm not a particularly talkative person, but I will interject as and when I have anything to add.
Okay,
but,
fair enough.
Yeah, I've. Jose, you're always so well informed and on these things. It's a pleasure to listen to you talk about it. To be honest, when I read, I tend to be quite a shallow reader. I enjoy the story and what's there on the surface, and it's not usually until I hear someone point these things out that I'm like, oh yeah, that's that was there simmering below the surface somewhere, but I never quite pick it out myself.
Yeah. Well, so what do you guys think about John Fury Zacharias? I mean, he's described as a painter, kind of a dissolute, and to me, it seems to be a kind of an idealized self-portrait of Clive in this a little bit to some extent. It's mentioned. Yeah. It's mentioned in one particular passage that I lined up here. He sweats to his essence while painting, and that's kind of Clive. I mean, if you ever saw Clive painting live, he's quite a sweater. It's actually kind of nasty, but he's a faker. He's a very talented man, but his hands lack the inspiration.
Yeah, and he's not this important reconciler or messiah until he sort of unlocks his imagination, which is also definitely an analog of Clive Barker. So
he unlocks his memories.
Yeah, being a faker, he's just copying other people's paintings, and now he's doing original work. Now he's this messiah, this imaginer.
It's kind of like a self-imposed punishment for failing the reconciliation, which wasn't entirely his fault, of course, as we will talk about further down the story. But when he asks Pi after the failed reconciliation 200 years ago to make him forget himself, so that every few years he would just his memory wouldn't go back beyond a certain point, and he would just reinvent himself after a while and start over. And he was basically sentencing himself to a life of limbo in a way, because he was too coward to ask for death. So he decided to just, make him forget himself until but a man this powerful, there's things left behind that will eventually catch up to him. And one of those things is, of course, Paiopa is still in our world. He's still bound to Gentle, because Gentle rescued Paiopa, who is a Mistiff. And a Mistiff was a very special kind of creature that was born in the Eredimec tribe. So the Eredimec tribe lived in the First Dominion originally, before Hepexamendios took over the First Dominion and banished his tribe from there. So the story about the Eredimecs is never really explained, and I'm just wondering, how would the First Dominion be like before Hepexamendios came? What sort of magic these Eredimecs would practice there? It seems like it was a very special place. But so a Mistiff is born only a few generations, and he's, like you said, he's like a perfect fantasy. He's like this creature who is very protean, very in flux. He has very powerful magic, and for some reason he found himself trapped in the Inovo, which is the place that separates the Fifth Dominion, which is our world, from all the other dominions. And the person who rescued him from there was the Maestro Sartori, which is John Fury Zacharias' real name. John Fury being kind of a construct that eventually he kind of takes over that personality. But so when we see him, like you said in the beginning, when Esterbrook is driving and stuff, he's being procured as an assassin. And so that's what happened after the Maestro Sartori tells him to please make me forget what I did. And then he says, and what am I supposed to do? And he says, well, you can live as a whore or assassin. I don't care. And he just said those words really like without thinking. Cuff.
Yeah, it was like a throwaway line.
And then he unwittingly sentences poor Paiopa to become a whore and an assassin for 200 years, which of course it's a horrible thing. It's the two things that can damage your soul the most, I guess, if you believe in those things.
And for the Eredimek tribe, that's heresy, right? To make a Mistiff do those things.
Yeah. In fact, he's put on trial after they reach the Zordorex. So Gentle is this kind of guy who just lives for the pleasure because he doesn't know any better. And he's involved in this because Chent, who was a procurer for Charlie Estabrook, one of the Godolphin brothers, he ended up contacting Piopa as an assassin to kill Judith. And that's what set this whole thing in motion, is like, when, unwittingly, these people who are all part of the same story end up involved. And so they're going to, things are going to clash, and, emotions and feelings and memories are going to get stirred. And that's what sets the whole thing in motion.
And somehow Dowd set that in motion too. And it's not really explained exactly how he put it into Estabrook's mind to do this, but maybe because Dowd was the one who hired that.
Well, Dowd is another servant who is bound by magic because he's not human. Yeah. He's bound by magic to the Godolphin family. Mm-hmm. And so I guess he was kind of the manservant or the procurer for whatever the Godolphin brothers wanted to do. And Charlie, in the absence of his brother Oscar, he talked to Dowd and said, "Hey, I need you to find me an assassin." And I guess since all these like creatures from outside the Fifth Dominion end up, sniffing each other out, Dowd knew Chent, and then Chent knew Pi. Yeah. So that's how this whole thing got started.
And going back to what you were saying about Gentle and Judith, and sort of hoping that they would get back together, there's a little part of the book where we're kind of tricked along with Judith into thinking that Sartori is Gentle. And then she sort of finds out along with us that no, that was actually the Maestro Sartori, the Autarch. Not the Maestro, that was the Autarch, the clone of Sartori, and not Gentle himself. And surprisingly, she's sort of okay with it. And I guess by the end, when she's not getting together with Gentle, and Hoi Polloi is not getting together with what is his name?
Monday.
Yeah, you kind of see that there's this sort of feminine power, and that Judith is on an island with the fish, and Judith is sort of on this path to goddesshood. That she does, basically, people who are there don't really need a man to sort of define their existence.
Or in some ways, a kind of priesthood of female priestess of sorts.
Yeah. Yeah, so yeah. Monday also has to sort of resign himself to that. Yes, I guess Hoi Polloi is not going to be with me anymore,
and yeah, no, I think Monday I think ends up with Hoi Polloi, right? He stays there.
Does he?
I think. I don't remember. No, it's a very big book.
He goes on with Gentle when they keep on going into the First Dominion, I think.
That's right. You're right. So Judith, there's a kind of a mirror image here because, and again, spoilers, I said I wasn't going to get too much into it, but I think there's a very interesting thing to talk about with this duality between Sartori and Gentle, and then Judith and Quessoir. So the truth is they are mirror images of each other. And as Judith is not the real Judith, she's a magic clone. Just as Sartori, the Autarch, took over his own creator's name and ran into the second Dominion. So what happened here was that I think it was Quessoir was the real Judith, right?
Yes.
Was she called right. Judith? She was her real name is Judith, I think. Yeah.
I think
so.
Yeah.
And then Gentle wanted to have a copy of that woman because they couldn't share her, and Gentle, despite being a very important maestro, was always kind of a very seductive, almost Casanova, although they do mention Casanova as well. Casanova was a member of the circle of people who surrounded the Maestro Sartori. But so he had a weakness for the fair sex, and he decided that, well, if I can't have Judith, then he asked Godolphin, "Can I make a copy of her for myself, and that way we can both have a Judith?"
Well, he actually made the copy for Oscar, and he wanted to keep Judith for himself because the copy was supposed to be better because she would live longer, and
he made a copy for the original one of the Godolphin's ancestors.
Not Joshua. It was it was Joshua Godolphin. He was the ancestor. So he made the copy for Joshua because the copy had this built-in sort of loyalty to the Godolphin heirs after they died.
Yeah, which is kind of weird, isn't it? I mean, it's kind of a weird thing that he would do that. It's like he's not caring much for the feelings of the clone, even though at one point he tells Godolphin after the reconciliation is failed that, Godolphin accuses him of being a devil and says, all these things that you did, they were just demonic things. You're probably a demon coming from hell to sentence us all to hell. And then he says no, and he's like, and he tells him, what about Judith? And he says, I don't want her anymore. And he says, don't do anything to her because he says she doesn't have a soul and stuff. And he says, no, don't do that because she's our only true victory in this. She's the only thing that we actually created, and you should keep her and cherish her and love her because she's the very special thing that we did. And the ritual was complicated, but the woman was supposed to be in the circle, and then the copy would get generated from the original. So, but what happened was that since he stole the original Judith from Godolphin, and I think he was either intoxicated or whatever, so he ended up joining the circle and making love to his girlfriend, and ended up, instead of just creating the copy of Judith, ended up creating a copy of himself. And that copy kind of escaped, and that's what actually destroyed the chance of reconciliation.
And that copy became the Autarch Sartori, and the Autarch Sartori was the version of Gentle who was sort of the conqueror and lustful and kind of all of these totally Hepexamendios version of Sartori.
He got the idea. He got the architect. He became the architect and the one who wanted to do his father's work. That's why he built his Ordorex. And then when you go into the First Dominion, the city of the Unbeheld is this enormous architectural fancy of that goes on forever. All these like fantastic little houses and squares and stuff. So he sees that echo of that city of God in the way that Sartori built his Ordorex, because he wanted to emulate that in a way. But yeah, it reminds me of that episode of Ren and Stimpy when Stimpy creates this serum that would be able to separate the bad from the good, and then he pours it all over himself, and Ren becomes the the Ren that was like apathetic, and the evil Ren, and then they just it just reminds me of that. So it's kind of like when they made a copy, one got the good things and the other got the bad things, and it's strange, but there's this duality there that one copy is living with the original while the other copy is enamored with the original in the Fifth Dominion. But it gets confusing.
It's also kind of explained early on in the book. I just wanted to touch on this, the First Dominion and the city, because Hepexamendios was a god created from the sort of collective will of the people of the Fifth Dominion. So kind of like in this Neil Gaiman sort of a way where our dreams create our mythology, right? Create our deities. People in the Fifth Dominion who couldn't conceive of the idea that we were connected to other dominions and that our world wasn't the only one, we created this sort of patriarchal, rampaging deity who sort of stomped through and destroyed his way through all the dominions and sort of set up camp in the First Dominion. And what he ends up doing is building this lavish city with nobody in it. It's like heaven, right? The First Dominion is heaven. And heaven is this great, beautiful place. And nobody's allowed there. Right? Nobody's good enough.
Right. That he's the city and the city is him.
Yeah.
But what I think that there may be an echo in here is that when I was younger, I read a book by Saint Augustine called "The City of God," or the full title, I think, in English is called "The City of God Against the Pagans." It's a book of Christian philosophy written by Saint Augustine, and it kind of feels like Clive was thinking about that when he made this City of God, especially when you look at the title, The City of God Against the Pagans. There may be some sort of like reference to St. Augustine's book, even though it's just Christian philosophy. But when you think about, uh, Judeo-Christian religion and doctrine, is that what happened with the church, like the establishment of the church, was that a lot of places where we have cathedrals nowadays and very important places for like the Roman Catholic Church, they used to be places that worshipped or that had temples that worshipped other gods. For example, I think St. Paul's Cathedral was built on a place where they had a temple that worshipped Diana.
Oh, sure, yeah, right. Yeah. Just the same way that the holidays got supplanted, like Easter became the day that Jesus rose from the dead. And...
Right. So there is this thing where the goddess of the Neolithic man and all those pagan goddesses that existed. I mean, every country has their own old mythology. I mean, in Portugal we have the Lusitanians. They had different gods and goddesses that were kind of. Some of them ended up becoming part of the Roman pantheon. Others were supplanted by Roman gods. But there's a lot of them that were goddesses. Usually for like either hunting or intelligence. They usually were goddesses. And so what happened was that the Roman Catholic religion was almost kind of a weaponization of the Christian religion, and it just with the Crusades and all that, they were just taking over all these fragments of pagan gods, all these like important relics and stuff, and they were just taking them away or destroying them, and they were establishing all these churches all around the place. And it's kind of what Epixamendios did in a way. He destroyed the goddesses. He threw them out. He banished them, and to make it more simple, that way you only had to pray to one god. So it's the analogy with going from a polytheist religion to like a monotheist religion, right?
Yeah. You want one guy for all of your problems.
Yeah.
One of the things that I found. It's one of the things that I found most interesting the first time I read through it, because I was raised in a very Christian family. My father is a preacher, so I was brought up in this environment of going to church and believing in the biblical mythology, I suppose you could put it. And it was, I think, Imajica for me just came along at the right time where I was starting to actually question these things that I'd just believed blindly for however many years. And I found it really interesting, the relationship between Gentle and Sartori and Epixamendios, and the fact that this deity that rules everything is almost a spoilt child, and he's just in it for himself, so in one regard, but that actually, Gentle represents, himself as a man. He represents, Satan in his alter ego of Sartori, but then ultimately rises to overpower his father. I found that really inspirational when I was reading it, and it probably led quite a lot to my decision to leave all that behind and take a more secular view of things. And I just found that whole bit so inspiring, and it was really opened my eyes to, oh wow, there's a different way of looking at things, and maybe what I've been told all my life is
one side of the story.
Different, exactly.
Yeah.
There's a comedian, Jim Jeffries, that I like quite a lot, who says he does a bit about about God and the devil, and he says, we've only got one side of the story. That in my eyes, the devil's being a bigger man because God's been spouting all this shit about him for thousands of years, and the devil, he's just not saying anything.
Yeah. There's a Tom Waits lyric that I particularly enjoy. He says, "Let me tell you, there's no devil. There's just God when he's drunk."
Oh, man.
Yeah, but yeah, I totally understand what you're saying, because I also got this idea when I was reading Imajica that again, this one God who is not really supposed to be male per se. It's just supposed to be this Godhead, but that maybe, you can have not just that side, but you can also understand that spirituality involves everything, like not just the monotheistic, ritualized, dogmatic religion, but also the pagan religion that existed before all that. That spirituality is as diverse as there are people on the earth. That everybody has their own idea of what God is, and so all of that is a valid experience of spirituality. So not just one God, or one goddess, but all of it.
I think that he was male. I mean, I think the pivot tower was sort of pretty phallic.
Yeah, that's true. That's another reference right there. But then there's that thing where Sartori moves the pivot to the tallest tower of his Ordorex, and he leaves behind that giant hole. And then there's one part at the end where that hole all of a sudden becomes a lake with the waters of the goddess. And it's rumored here in the book, it says that, they said that that was the passing of water of a single woman during one night, which is one of those funny legends that he created for this. So
that would get boring after a while. You'd kind of want it to stop.
Yeah. But yeah, so there's a lot of that. There's a lot of this showing of the other side, the complementary side to Hypexamendios, which are the goddesses. And one of another favorite moments in the book is when Pi and Gentle, after they arrive in Parashokwa and they pass through Beatrix, which the people there had this downy fur over their bodies. Every time I read this, I think of them as kind of Wookiees, although I know they're not that hairy.
Yeah.
But
they're just more fuzzy than furry.
Yeah. And then they take to the pass of the mountains in Jokalailau Mountains.
Yeah.
And so when they go there, they discover this glacier thing, or this kind of like frozen river, where there are all these women and bowls and stuff, and it's all frozen under the water. And there's this very dreamlike scene, which is also, it's really written like a dream, but then we discover it's not, where Gentle goes over to this frozen glacier, and he decides to try to break the ice and release those women. So he starts using his magic, his breath magic, the pneuma. Yeah, the pneuma. So he hits the ice until they're released, and then there's these agents of the Pexamendios that kind of show up to prevent him from doing so. But he eventually does it. And then when they cross through the fourth dominion onto the third dominion, they do it because they follow this woman that she's covered in ice. She still has ice on her hair and stuff, so it twinkles like little bells. And they follow her, and they come to this tunnel, and they think it's a dead end until they discovered they had to break on through to the other side. And it's almost kind of like being born into the third dominion. It's almost like they're going through between the legs of the mountains, and then they're coming off the other side. Yeah. So.
And that was that Jokalailau that led them through the goddess herself, or was it just one of her priestesses?
That's a good point. I don't remember. I think it was just one of the priestesses, or it could have been the goddess for all I know.
Yeah.
Because these pagan goddesses, they represent Jokalailau is the mountains, Tishalule is the one from water. She resides in the cradle of Cherzamit. She's trapped in that lake full of silverfish that becomes frozen when there's no sun, and then it just boils into life when the sun comes out.
Yeah.
And then there's the other one, Umagamagi, right?
Yeah.
That's the most mysterious one.
And they're all pretty different from each other. They have different opinions. They're not just these sort of gentle, thoughtful, caring goddesses. They all have they're fierce and they have different opinions, and they're all pretty different from each other.
Yeah. I think one of this book's greatest accomplishments is that it not only entertains, but it inspires people. And I think, for example, I know that we've all been inspired in some way or another by this book. But for example, when we announced that we were going to do Imajica, we had this comment from a listener who said, and I'm going to find it here.
It's down. I put it down at the bottom, so you can just scroll down on the notes.
I see.
Martin Ford.
Yeah. Martin D. Ford said, I can't wait. This book changed my life and helped me with self-acceptance issues. You guys will do great on this episode. Also, ever noticed how certain imagery reappears in Imajica, like the clones being skinless? Totally reminds me of Hellbound. Yeah, thanks, Martin. That's a good point.
And I think that Clive Barker has said that skinless people sort of freak him out. And so that's his way of facing his own fears, having that in Hell, in the Hellbound Heart and in Hellraiser, and then probably to a lesser extent in Hellbound, just because he wasn't super involved in that movie. But
yeah, one of the earliest examples of the skinless person comes from that short movie that he shot in 16mm called The Forbidden, where Peter Atkins is skinned by angels. So they did that by painting fresh paint over Peter Atkins and letting it dry, and then painting another layer. And then when they were shooting it, they started removing the layers of the paint, and it looks like they're skinning him. Yeah. And this was inspired by a book, one of the first anatomy books that was made. It was called De Humani Corporis Fabrica, and it was made by, I forgot the name of the author. But that's one of the illustrations that first struck Clive, and they kind of inspired him to make that the Forbidden scene where Peter Atkins does a pose after he's skinned by the angels. That pose is the exact same pose in that book.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. So that keeps reappearing in Clive Barker stuff as well. So now that you said that skinless people freak him out, I guess that now we know why it haunts him so much.
Yeah.
Okay, I found it. It was by an anatomist called Andreas Vesalius, who lived in 1514 to 1564. And I think I was lucky enough to visit Germany once, and I went to the Gutenberg Museum, where I saw some of the first books that were ever printed. They were Bibles, and they were just under these enormous, safe doors, and I got to see that. But I also got to see a first edition of this book, De Humani Corporis Fabrica, and
oh, wow.
Very striking. When you look at it, it's very striking to see those engravings of these skin bodies just posing and pointing up and doing these things, very classic. But at the same time, it's just meant to show you where all the muscles are, and they just they thought that, hey, at least if you're going to make an anatomist, engraving, at least make it interesting, make him strike a pose.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's funny. But this book inspires people, and it helps them understand who they are. It helps them with self-acceptance issues, like Martin said. I think it inspired me. I mean, I when I read this book, I think a lot of people out there might have done the same. I started writing a story. I was like, I want to write a story too. I want to come up with something, I want to get into fantasy and write stuff. And I even made a drawing of a Nulianak. Of course, it didn't look nearly as good as what Richard Kirk does here.
Yeah.
But it's.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say it inspires people, and I think it inspired you guys too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Going back to what I said, previously about the religious aspect, what Martin said really resonated with me in terms of self-acceptance. It was, that realization that we don't have to look outside of ourselves to find happiness and contentment and a reason for being. It's all contained within us, and we can choose to react to that however we want and change ourselves if we're not happy with who we are at that time. So I really understand where Martin came from, because I had a very similar experience when I was reading it.
Yeah, and going back to what you just referenced, Mark Allen Gunnels did a comment. He said, "I only finally read this recently, and it's the definition of epic: intricate and complex, exciting and emotional, involving, a true masterpiece."
I agree.
What I thought made it, a true masterpiece is, as well as having that epic, massive side to it, it was also really personal. It was about these individuals and how they relate to each other. And it seemed to span that gulf between being a really personal story on a really epic scale. And I really enjoyed that aspect of
it. It to me, it informed me that love doesn't have gender. Love doesn't have a particular sexual preference. Yeah. It's much like Paiopa. Love is between two people to a very not only physical but a very spiritual level. That's what defines love. Is it's a full body and soul experience, and that's what I think he describes perfectly in his relationship with between Gentle and Pai. That it's very enlightening to read this stuff and to come to terms with the fact that like. Why do we have to have prejudice against people who are different from us? We don't. I mean, look at Clem and Taylor. They have a story arc in this to the point where Taylor becomes an angel of sorts, and it's a very striking reference to the whole AIDS epidemic that happened back in the 80s. And early 90s. So in that sense, it was kind of teaching us that, look, you don't have to hate these people. You don't have to think that only one sort of love is right or wrong. It just tells you that all you need to think about is that love is not only physical, it's a spiritual experience, and it comes between two souls, regardless of gender, regardless of race, regardless of who they are. As long as it's honest, and as long as it's honest and it's pure, as long as it's honest, it's valid. So that's what I got from this. That's what love is.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, and I think in the 80s and the early 90s, when this book came out, previously I probably had some prejudices about that. I can't really remember exactly. I wasn't super.
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, I was just, in a school full of other people who, talked, said stuff like that was normal, and to have this book and its philosophy sort of open my eyes and say, no, look, this is, this sort of expression is just like any other. It's just as valid, and I thought that was a really important point too. And this is not related at all, but do you guys see on the Lord of Illusions poster that the two hands with the lightning between them? Did that make you think of the Nullianak?
Oh. Yeah. Yeah. Now that you mention it, I guess, sure. I guess at some point I must have thought the same thing, and I just never really brought it up, I guess. But yeah, when the less known poster of the Lord of Illusions, like you said, the one that has the teaser poster that says "Prepare for the Coming," where you see like these hands, and then there's this pair of eyes in the middle. Yeah, that's good catch there. Good catch. We'll add that to the show notes, the poster, for anybody who hasn't seen it. Yeah, because I know that the more common poster of Lord of Illusions is the one that has the magician with his arms open. And then there's like the dreamlike things around him and the blue background. So yeah, that's a good point. And again, if you look at that poster for Lord of Illusions, there's an echo of the medallion by the shoal that has the man swimming in the sea with his arms open.
Oh yeah.
So I guess there's this echoing iconography throughout Clive Barker's work.
And speaking of that, what do you think of the iconography of the Nullianaks themselves? I mean, the fact that their head is made of two sort of praying hands, and they have eyeballs on their thumbs, and there's sort of a lightning going in between, and they're they're the sort of secret soldiers of Hepexamendios, right?
Right.
They're like one tribe, and they all share each other's experiences.
Mm-hmm. Like you said, I mean, the praying hands. I mean, that could be a very obvious reference to, dogma, to the secret army of God that would come out when the circle was complete. They would come out and finish destroying everything. It's much like God's Crusaders, I guess.
Yeah,
Hepexamendios Crusaders, and they
one thing that's always one thing that always annoyed me about my parents' religion was when they would refer to themselves as prayer warriors. When they needed to go into battle, as it were, they'd get down on the knees and pray rather than doing anything about it, which really that always wound me up. But I that really again resonated with me with the prayer warriors of the Nullinax with the praying hands. Actually, they're there for a purpose and doing that. Kind of the opposite of what my parents were doing. They were actually taking action and attempting to destroy the Imajica. But it was a very striking image, and something that Clive does so well is just create these amazing creatures that are so beyond anything that you could that I could imagine on my own. But he paints them so vividly and creates these fully rounded monsters that just instantly jump off the page.
They also had this sort of penchant for destroying innocents, right? They would rape little girls, and it's sort of an analog of this epidemic with Catholic priests.
Huh. Well, I do remember that scene with the Nullinac that kills the original Huzzah.
Yeah.
It's like they're designed to destroy innocence in a way.
Yeah.
And he's the only Nullinac that is killed by Gentle. It's another very striking scene when he, in his anger, he uses a giant, breath pneuma, and he not only destroys the Nullinac, but he ends up destroying part of the slum, right?
Yeah, actually, that's the second Nullinac that he kills.
Oh, okay, got it. The first one is in Patashokwa, right?
Yeah, right. And this pneuma that he creates is sort of like a rolling snowball that just keeps on destroying things as it goes along, and it's got his face on it, right?
Yeah. That's another very striking part that happens. One of the things that I asked Clive once, we had the chance to send Phil and Sarah from Revelations some questions for one of their revelatory interviews. And so a few years ago, I told them that to me, Abarat is very Blake-like, as the writing and paintings create a total vision. I could see something of you in the character of Imajica, Gentle, who finds a way to recover from his amnesia by taking up some chalks and starts drawing the people and landscapes that he's seen in the Dominions, letting the images and stories pour out of his head and teach him how to connect it all together again. Drawing parallels with the Abarat project, was this the way you let Abarat bloom out of your brain? The paintings taking you by the hand to travel in a bestiary of the subconscious? And did the painting surprise you, influencing the story into certain directions visually? And this was Clive Barker's reply. He said, I love this question. I really, really love this question. Abarat is very Blake-like, creating a total vision. He's so right. It's so much of what I wanted these books to be. And as I move through 3, 4, and 5, you will see, and everybody else will see me pushing hard to make those connections between the visual and the literary, tighter and stronger and more significance. And he makes this gorgeous analogy with Gentle, which is a beautiful point. It's just a beautiful question. I almost feel every part of the question is rhetorical. He's answered himself, really, correctly. The only real question is, do the paintings surprise me? And the answer is, damn right they do. I'm producing pictures at quite a rate now, and I have the experience of going through paintings as they are taken away. I say, take this away before I fuck with it anymore. Just take it away. And I will not go to the gallery house for maybe a week or 10 days, and I will say, what is that? Obviously, I know it's my handiwork. I have a vague sense of where I was when I was making it. But when a gentleman was here recently talking to me about Prometheus, not only stealing fire, of course, for humanity, but also his blood producing flowers from the earth, which was something I didn't know, it turned out both images were included in this painting that I had finished 2 weeks before I met him. And this is about a picture that there's a man and there's flowers coming out of the ground and they're kind of impaling him, and there's this blood is making flowers. So that was my question about this whole part of the Imajica and Gentle kind of putting his thoughts in order after he's attacked by those revenants at the house in Clerkenwell. When he's trying to prepare to start the reconciliation again, which was something that had to happen or could happen every 200 years. And so to prevent that, they left behind this creature from the Inovo called the Little Ease. Yeah, kind of always envision him as like the Yattering from the Yattering and Jack.
He is he is really similar. He's kind of a little ape.
Yeah. And then he releases those memories to, disturb him and make him go a little crazy. But he ends up in the South Bank of London, homeless, and he makes friends, and eventually he starts putting everything in order, and then he gets ready just in time for the reconciliation. So that was my question to Clive about this, and I guess he liked it.
I only had one really sort of brief conversation with Clive Barker about Imajica. It was like at Texas Frightmare weekend, and I had just recently read Holy Blood, Holy Grail, which is sort of this nonfiction book about the theory about Jesus not being crucified, or that he was saved from the crucifixion, and that he married Mary Magdalene, and they went to France and fathered the Merovingian priest kings. So I asked Clive Barker, what do you think about all of that? And he said, one time I went to Chateau Le Rennais, that church in France, that supposedly had this secret that the church is covered up. And he said I tried everything to get the priest to let me go down, into the catacombs, and it wouldn't go. And he said I even offered him cocaine. And I had this horrified look on my face, and he goes, I was just kidding. And it's like, I kind of don't think he was kidding, but then he said, if you want to know what I think about religion, it's all in Imajica. Everything that I believe, all of my religious thoughts are in Imajica, so you should read that if you want to know my thoughts. So, and I thought that was pretty good. And I think he's sort of reiterated that in interviews with people and stuff too, that Imajica is kind of his encapsulates his religious philosophy.
Mm-hmm. I think that's an excellent point.
Yeah, I remember you saying, Jose, I think when we first were talking about doing this episode, and before I'd read Imajica for the second time, I think you made a comment along the lines of it's your Bible. And that really resonated again with me.
It's almost like my Gospels.
Yeah, and Clive's as well from the sound of things. He put all of his religious in there.
Well, like I said, I just wanted desperately to live in this world that he created. It's just, even though there's horrible things happening, it's just so beautiful. And I want to bring the attention to the appendix here that was actually composed by Hans Ruffert, who also worked with Clive in other projects. But when you look at the entry for Father Athanasius, who's the guy who actually marries Gentle and Pie at the cradle, it says here the definition for Father Athanasius is leader and high priest of the Durthers. Father Athanasius represents the second dominion for the synod during the reconciliation. And then the sentence that I think more interesting is, Athanasius's physical resemblance to Christ may be more than coincidental. So I always wondered about that. What is that supposed to mean? Could it be that Christos the Reconciler, that failed the reconciliation, actually rose from the dead because he was never dead, and he ended up moving to the second dominion? I always wondered about that. It's maybe a little heretic of me to think that, but who knows?
Well, and then if that's the case, he would be sort of making up for his past crimes, right? Or for failing by worshiping and raising up the goddesses.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because the Durthers have those tents where they're protecting the images of the goddesses, because I guess, the Durthers do worship the goddesses, and I guess they were just biding their time in front of the erasure.
And there's really no other explanation given for why he has these stigmata, right?
Right. Yes. Yes. Uh-huh. Oh, I guess my theory and this ambiguous line is becoming more plausible by the minute.
Yeah. Well, and Quasar thinks that he for sure is Christos, and I don't think he doesn't ever exactly deny it, right?
Right, right.
He gets shot at one point, doesn't he?
Because, yeah, in Clive Barker's stories, it's like people never really die. From books like Everville, where you have all these people who keep, even though their body is destroyed, their spirit lives on. And in this book, the Imajica, there's these magic spells that can make you live forever almost, or at least extend your lifespan considerably. And it seems like it's not beyond the skills of someone who would actually put some time into it, like poor Lucius becomes a worthless fellow called Chica Jakim, and after the failed reconciliation, Gentle tells him, "I want you to take my books and go as far as you can to the other side of the Imajica if you want, but try to find the way the way to let time not touch your body. So when the time comes to do this again, you will still be there, and every one of your enemies is going to be gone." And so it seems like it was attainable for people. I mean, Mamulian finds the secret to eternal life. He's given that secret by an Asian monk, right?
Yeah, yeah.
During the First World War, and then he becomes this powerful creature. So in Clive's world, in Clive's creative world, magic is not only a real thing, but a thing that's attainable for normal people.
Well, and not only that, but I think the reconciliation itself is actually kind of easy. It seems like the Imajica wants to be healed, and that's its natural state, is to be healed. So setting up the reconciliation is really not that difficult, and then it sort of takes over itself. And the real difficulty is outside influences ruining it.
Yeah. It was possible once every 200 years. So since Jesus, that was 10 possible attempts. At least 2 of those were performed by the maestro, John Zacharias. I wonder if there were none performed in the meantime, or maybe they were all failed attempts. Who knows? Like they said, the Tabula Rasa kept a good track record in preventing anything from happening for 200 years.
Yeah.
But
well,
yes.
Sort of. I mean, they the only attempts that they're the first one they were involved with, and then the next one they were all dead by the time it happened.
Yeah. Also because I guess their heart really wasn't in it. I mean, like all things that are boring and protect the status quo, eventually they just forget that if they don't actively do it, that they can make everything so normal that they forget that there are actually, like, most of them didn't even believe that stuff was true at one point.
Yeah.
Because they protected it so well that even the descendants of those guys don't believe that anything ever happened. They don't even know, which is funny to me. So yeah, it's a gorgeous book. I'm looking at this illustration by Richard Kirk of The Retreat. Such a beautiful illustration. All these wonderful landscapes, Isordarex. The most weird creature here, apart from the Nullianak, are also the Othax, because they're like these small creatures with a giant head.
Oh yeah, right.
Yeah, that's really, really weird.
One other sort of connection I wanted to bring up is that in Clive Barker stories, you get a Messiah, right? He's a Messiah character that his job is to heal the world or heal the division or a breach, but he's also the destroyer, and he's typically the person who caused the problem to begin with.
Yeah, just like Boone.
Yeah, Aaron Boone or the Jaff he wants to practice the art, right? So he's the artist, just like Gentle is an artist, and the Jaff is kind of a screw up too. He's not a savior, but
right.
But yeah, Gentle.
There's Fletcher and there's Jeff. Yeah.
Yeah, and Gentle creating the creating the autarch, is a horrible, horrible, crime.
Yeah, the autarch does horrible atrocities, and one of the mentions of the atrocities that the autarch of Azordarex had, perpetrated all over the Imajica. One of them is like there was a university city, and all its students had their brains scooped up and thrown in the middle of the city in a big pile. And this was the kind of stuff that the autarch was doing. I mean, look at the moment when they finally, Pi and Gentle come across one of the first atrocities after they enter the Imajica, is that the little village of Beatrix gets completely razed to the ground and everybody gets killed. Poor Ifrit Splendid, the very enthusiastic kid. He's just so happy. He just wants to go to his Ordorex. He wants to see the world. And he ends up face down in a pile with his mouth and his eyes open. It's just horrible.
Yeah.
And all that stuff happened because of Gentle's actions. So yeah, in that sense, you're right. Sertori healed the world, but at the same time, he also caused a lot of harm. So I guess that's why I understand at the end when he removes himself from the world, he's like, well, my job is done, and now before I do anything else, just like when Clive finishes a painting and he says, "Take it away from me before I ruin it."
Yeah,
so,
right.
He just decides to remove himself from the world because he discovered a place where he can finally, just lay and rest and be there forever.
Well, inside of the circle, right? He and Pi travel together inside the circle, so they're not going around the Imajica anymore, but they're going inside, and that's really interesting. That sort of opens up a whole new possibility of a whole new world to explore.
Yeah, well, in one interview that he gave years ago, back in December of '91, and let me just find that real quickly. Here it is. It was an interview that he did for Marvel Age magazine number 107 in December of '91. And he's talking about how Imajica was doing really well. He had finished it not too long ago. He was announcing that they were doing a second printing of it that was selling really well. And then he says at the end that they ask him about what would come after that, because that he ends the book in the beginning of another trip for Gentle. Yeah, so he says that he wanted to leave that to the reader. The whatever adventure, whatever is inside the circle, that he wanted to leave that to the reader because he thinks that would be more effective. And it's like, yeah, I mean, is inside the circle a real place? Is it more like a state of being? Is it more like a different dimension? Is it heaven? That's kind of what it seems like to me.
It's like Bilbo and Frodo riding off, to the west with the elves at the end of Lord of the Rings. Yeah.
Oh yeah, when they go to the west.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, they get in the boat and they go to the west. It's like, where is that? Is that an island? What would keep that safe from Sauron if he really, won the battle? Wouldn't that just put troops in a boat and go west?
I think they're going into the afterlife.
Yeah. That's kind of what it is. Oh, here it is. Okay. Oh, right. So he just says, I handwrite everything. Now I've done 3 drafts on Imajica, which comes to about 14,000 pages. When you're working on a novel, you really must give your life over to the project. This is my 11th book, and I'm fortunate to know that the audience is there for it. I'm not just writing in the dark. Oh, okay. This is when he's talking about, yeah. And then someone had to type that stuff. He says that there's one person in America and one person in England that had to type his hieroglyphics into something that's readable.
Jeez.
And he brings up that Tolstoy's wife hand wrote 3 different drafts of War and Peace. And I don't know if you ever read War and Peace, but it's a huge brick of a book. And he says, Mrs. Tolstoy served her husband above and beyond the call of duty. I'd say.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Imajica was also a little bit of a surprise because at that point he had been telling people that there was going to be a trilogy, of Cabal, and there would be the Great Secret Show, the Books of the Art. There would be a trilogy, and so those were the things that people were expecting next. And then instead we got Imajica, and then we got The Thief of Always, which were great, but there were people were complaining at the time, just like they do now. People were complaining that where's the sequel to Cabal? Where's the second book of the art? Which he gave in and he did the second book of the art in 3 years later.
Right.
Which back then seemed like a long time, but nowadays 3 years is nothing. Between books for Clive Barker.
Yes, I know what you mean. I mean, when he started Galilee, which is another book that we will get to in our next year, but when he started Galilee, he actually had the ambition to make it even bigger than Imajica. He wanted to make that the big family, the two dynasties of humans versus Barbarossas, right? And almost humans versus demigods. And he kept saying that it's going to be 2 or 3 books. It's going to be even bigger than Imajica. And so, he always likes to make these big, ambitious epics. I mean, just look at Abarat, which is a very successful one.
He starts things that are difficult to finish.
Yeah.
And he gets new ideas before he can finish them sometimes.
Yeah, because that's just how he works. I mean, if the only thing that I would like to see Clive is have a more ordered system of working, but it's hard because he's driven by his own creativity in ways that he just doesn't understand and he doesn't control. And that's why he just, he works on a book like, for example, Mr. Begone.
Yeah, right.
He wrote that book in like a few months, and he said that it was just this voice that came into his head and he just couldn't get rid of it. So he said, well, I guess I'm just going to write the book. And he did that, and it was a surprise for everyone because he had never announced that he was working on a book like that. When it came out,
in between the Abarat 2 and 3, I think, right?
Yeah. So, if you guys ever listened to Loveline with Dr. Drew and Adam, there used to be this show called Loveline, and Clive Barker was a recurring guest on that. He must have been there like 4 or 5 times. I think I have all those episodes stored in a hard drive somewhere. And I do remember that in one of them, he said that he one of the things he feels passionate about is writing stuff that contains stuff he wants to say. That sounds like an obvious statement, but a lot of fiction, what we might call airport fiction, the book that you leave on the plane, even if you didn't finish it, it doesn't really have a lot to tell you.
Even if you didn't finish it.
Yeah, doesn't have a lot to say. And he says, I want to communicate things to people. I have passions. I want to communicate. And Imajica was written out of a passion to write about God. So, like you said, this is his book where he pours his heart out about religion. This is the one.
Yeah.
That's why it's so appealing to us, because it appeals to our spirituality. And that's a place that is very special for all of us.
Spirituality and personal philosophy too, and I think probably his most important book so far, right, or to date.
I would say so.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, for Clive personally, I know that Imajica was a very important book, but I think now one of the things that's kind of taken over for him is Abarat. Because I remember him saying in a featurette about his work as a painter it was either the Midnight Meat Train or something like that. So, yeah, I think that Clive Barker has mentioned repeatedly over the years that Imajica was his favorite book and the one that he thinks is his biggest book. But I think nowadays what's taken over for him in terms of importance is Abarat. Because I remember seeing several interviews and one featurette where he's talking about his painting, which is something that he delved profoundly as an artist, was his painting. And he says that for me, I'm a gay man. I don't have kids. These are my kids, so the Abarat paintings are his kids. That's his legacy. He wants to leave as kind of like a Tolkien trilogy. He wants to leave his 5 Abarat books as kind of his most accomplished Blakean vision, and if you're into William Blake, you know that Blake not only wrote poetry, but he also illustrated all his books, and that's kind of what Clive is inspired by, William Blake a lot, and so artistically he's very inspired by William Blake and Goya and all those artists. So it's a book that inspires us a lot. And I know, Ben, it inspired you also to compose some music, right? You want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, definitely. It wasn't just Imajica, actually. I have for a few years had an intention that I would write a series of pieces of music based on Clive's work. Aside from the fact that I love everything that Clive does, it was more of an exercise in sort of learning technicalities of music production. I find my ambition often far exceeds my technical ability at doing these kind of things. And I thought that having a project like this, where I could work on a series of pieces of music based on Clive stuff, would force me to just learn so much about how to produce music. And yeah, that's been kind of in the back of my mind for a long time. And again, it was when the opportunity to do this episode came up that I thought, well, now is as good a time as any to get stuck in and have a crack at doing something for Imajica. And one of my favourite bits of the book has always been the cradle of Cesare Smith's. It's one that I just find is so visual. I can picture exactly what it looks like. And I just love the whole section. I love the idea of the solid sea that comes to life when the sun shines on it. I love the idea of the birds that have been caught in the solidifying sea, and you've got the corpses kind of sticking out of the solid water. And then when the kind of sun breaks over through the clouds, the chase or the race that Pi and Gentle go on to try and reach the island or the boat that's coming for them before they drown in this chaos of the living sea. I think he said it's the fish that are in there and flailing about are not fish in the sea; they are the sea. And I just found that whole section so evocative that was immediately, as soon as I knew I was wanting to write a piece of music for Imajica, that was always going to be the one that I wanted to do. So I spent the last few weeks in between work and looking after the kids, which isn't a massive amount of time, trying to put this together. It's without a doubt the most ambitious thing I've ever attempted in terms of music. Traditionally, I'm a metalhead. I've been in bands for years. I've dabbled with some electronica and some little bits of film score stuff in the past. And again, one of the reasons why I wanted to do this Clive Barker project musically was to give me an opportunity to practice kind of film soundtrack kind of music. I struggle to follow someone else's brief, which is why when I've attempted to do film soundtracks in the past, it's never really worked out very well because I find that when I start, the music just takes over itself. It goes on its own little journey. I have very little control over where that's going. It just I just sort of steer it wherever it wants to go. So again, I thought this would be a good opportunity to practice, and then in the future, I would maybe be better at doing what I intend to do, or knowing what I can do and how to achieve what I set out to do. This wasn't the case for this one. I started off with a very simple idea that I wanted to throw together a whole load of different, very disparate elements. I wanted to create this feel of a completely different world, and lots of different kind of cultures clashing. So kind of the main bit for the first half of the song is all Chinese flutes. But then there's some MIDI that I got that was a Syrian woman singing, and that's mixed in with a Bulgarian woman singing.
Oh.
So it kind of evokes Tishalule.
Yeah. In fact, kind of when it's all, when you listen to the music, if you haven't already, then when it gets to the bit where the sun has come out and it's starting to melt the sea, there's a big bit where a big choir kicks in, And I managed to find a bit of software I could program them to actually be singing Tisha Lule, Tisha Lule.
Oh, wow.
It doesn't come across quite as well as I would have liked it to. Obviously, it's a piece of software. It's not a real group of people singing, so it's not 100%. But if you listen carefully, you can kind of make it out.
Well, now I have to listen again, and we will put that at the end of the episode here, so people can listen to it. And if you're okay with it, we'll put a link to it in our show notes so that people can hear it in stereo instead of mono, which is what this podcast is.
Yeah, no, absolutely, that's absolutely fine. I say it was more for my benefit that I wanted to have a crack at this thing, and it's not quite finished yet. I'm hoping I'll get it finished in time for when the podcast goes out. But even what's there now,
I thought it was great.
Considering. Yeah, well, I had no idea what it was going to end up like, and like I say, it's far beyond anything I've attempted to do before. So, I'm really pleased with how it's gone, and I hope other people enjoy it. And I've got a whole list of other bits of Clive that I want to put music to. A couple that I've kind of started already. I did attempt to do a very kind of tribal, ethnic piece of music for the
Nightbreed.
No, I've tried to steer clear of things that already have music.
Right, I understand.
Because I couldn't compete with the work that Christopher Young did on Hellraiser. That's the perfect soundtrack, or two soundtracks as I see it. And Danny Elfman's Nightbreed is fantastic as well. So rather than be kind of constrained by what these guys have done, and know that I'm not going to add anything to that. There's a wealth of other material by Clive out there that hasn't got any music that I wanted to do, and I'm kicking myself. So I can't remember the name of that one. It's the Book of Blood with the tribe in the jungle when they
How Spoilers Bleed.
They touch you. That's the one. Yeah. That's been a glorious failure so far. I've not been able to do anything with that. But the Imajica one. I'm really pleased with how it's turning out, and if I can just polish it up a little bit in time for the podcast going out, I'll be really pleased with it.
That's fantastic. This just shows that Clive's work, gives comfort to people who may not be creative, but for the creatives, it really inspires them, and it's just amazing for me how much Clive's work and ends up inspiring people who have the skill and the know-how to be able to make more art and put more art out into the world, which is, it's really the great work, is to create art that everybody can enjoy and entertainment. And I think that's really fantastic.
Well, yeah, I shall, as the project continues, I say it's taken me 3 or 4 years to get the first piece down. So if you guys are still around in another 30 years when I finally finish the project, I'll give you a shout.
Well, let's hope so. Let's hope so. We're kind of running out of stuff to talk about. But there's always news coming out every week about Clive Barker stuff. So as long as there's stuff to talk about, you guys are going to have to deal with us.
Yeah. So, and speaking of that, on the site, we've got a few things. There was one funny comment. You know that article that I wrote like 2 years ago or 3 years ago? 10 things. Yeah, There was somebody that wrote a funny comment. I'm going to pull that up here.
Okay. 10 things that people should not, or people should stop asking Clive Barker? Or was that the title? 10
things that Clive Barker fans shouldn't do.
Okay.
So T. Cavello said, "Thank you so much for whacking my nose with the newspaper. I don't know how I get along in the world without people like you."
Well, I understand that some people don't take kindly to be told what to do, but I guess there's a lot of people who always ask Clive Barker to write the sequel to this book that I like, and it's I understand sometimes it takes a long time for a Clive Barker book to come out, and but hey, there's new stuff that came out recently that I think most people out there may not even know of. Like there's that beautiful little book called Tonight Again, which is a little book of erotic fiction and short stories by Clive Barker.
And poems.
So, go in poems. Yeah. So go find that. If you can find a copy of that, that's a really good book.
We've also done, since our last episode, we've done Lord of Illusions commentary and Hellbound audio commentary. So those can be found in our podcast feed or on the website, clivebarkercast.com. Our next audio commentary is going to be Hellraiser 3, Hell on Earth.
I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, it'll be fun.
Rock and roll Pinhead.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm currently editing my review of the game Jericho. I recorded it I played it all the way through and recorded the whole thing, so I could do my commentary and review video. So it's a long editing process. I got another 30 seconds of it done last night, but
I guess you're going to put a lot of boss fight footage in there.
Maybe it's more like the way I do it is I kind of create a narrative review so I record the audio, and then I look for footage that matches what I'm saying and kind of put that in there after.
I'm recording my playthrough of Undying, and I've made it to the Standing Stones, so I'm recording that as well. And when we have that done, I'm also going to do the same thing you did. I'm going to edit it all and make a review and probably post the whole playthrough on the YouTube channel of BarkerCast.
Oh, wow.
So watch out for that.
Awesome. Yeah, and Ben, is there any place that people could follow you, like Twitter or Facebook? What do you prefer?
I've never kind of understood Twitter, so I don't tend to use that.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm on Facebook. In terms of my music, I've got a SoundCloud page, which is where you'll find the piece of music when I upload it at the weekend.
Okay.
There's also a bunch of other things on there as well. There's a mixture of kind of film score stuff mixed in with some kind of electronic, instrumental hip hop and a bit of jazz, and some of my metal work as well is in there as well. So a real good mix. If you don't like one song, chances are you'll like the next one because it's completely different.
What's the URL or the address for that SoundCloud page?
It's soundcloud.com/Hoodwink. That's HUD, WINK.
Okay.
If you can put a link in the show notes, that'd be magic. But yeah, everything's up there, and as and when my children give me the opportunity to spend any time doing music, new things will appear there every now and again.
Excellent. I'm going to follow you because I also have a SoundCloud page, although I don't make music, so I just follow stuff there. So excellent. Awesome. It was really fun. I think, are we all talked out of Imajica?
I think so. Yeah. I think Ben, did you have anything that you wanted to add or any thoughts?
No, not so much. I think we've covered a lot of stuff. I think given the opportunity, there's probably many more things we could find to say about it because it's such a massive piece of work.
Oh,
but,
yeah.
I think
there was, I guess, one more connection that I had. I just thought of the antagonist, right? We've got the autarch Sartori. He's this sort of empty character that's filled with darkness, and he has no soul, and he wants to destroy everything, and he wants to take someone that he loves with him. Mm-hmm. And that's a recurring character with Clive Barker, right? We've got Mamulian in the Damnation game. We've got Nyx in the Lord of Illusions.
Yep. They just want to go. They just want to go out into the darkness, and they want to take their loved one with them. And in this case, it's Sartori wants to take the copy Judith because I guess he identifies with her a little bit since they're both magical clones. And ultimately, Judith is pregnant with his child. So there's that. Except in this case, they're a couple. Usually it's a master and a disciple. In this case, it's a couple.
Yeah.
So that's fascinating. All right. I guess that's it for Imajica. Really beautiful book that I totally recommend. Please go out and get a copy of it. If you can't buy the very expensive hardcover edition, then you can buy a used copy on Amazon for like a penny, which is what I did for my work copy here. Which I had
it a paperback?
Yeah, it's got the illustrations and the appendix. I bought it for $1 plus shipping from Amazon. So
that one's that's the 2-book one, isn't it?
No, it's just one book.
There's a one-book version that has the illustrations in it?
Yes, there is.
Oh, I thought that was only the 2-book one with. Okay.
No, I have it right here. It was my work copy. Okay. It's all broken up and all full of like notes in it and stuff. But
that must be even later than when that came out.
Yeah. So
Okay.
go and get that book if you haven't, because it's really fantastic.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I hope we did justice to this book in this episode, and I hope, Ben, that you're happy with our episode. And thank you very much for supporting our podcast. You guys are awesome.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for having me. You guys keep up the good work, and look forward to hearing a lot more from you in the coming years.
Really quick, there were a few more comments that happened after. This is Ryan, by the way. I'm just jumping in here after the podcast we were finished recording, but before editing, we had a couple of more comments that I thought I'd just kind of get in here. Tigra Maria says, would be interesting to listen, though I've not read the book yet. And Annabelle Jordan Bush says, it's my favorite book. And then Josh Stetz said, this is the episode I've been waiting for. This is my hands-down favorite and easily the best book I've read. 5 times, and it's still as amazing, if not more, as the first time. Mark said what needs to be said. You laugh, you cry, you fear for some of the characters as much as you hate others. Imajica is so much of an influence on me. My gamer tag is Oviet, and I play in a band called The Ovo for many years. We had a song called Reconciler that is basically Gentle's story. I'm looking forward to listening to this one. Thanks for what you guys do. I've been a listener since early episodes. Nice to know people share my obsession with Clive's work. So awesome. Yeah, thank you so much. And that was really nice. And that's cool. Well, if you have any songs from that time, that would be cool to hear. Songs from the Ovo. But we agree. This was an important book, and like Jose said earlier, I hope that we did it justice. And thank you so much for listening and bearing with some of our earlier episodes as well. All right. So then, now as we've got all the sign off stuff, but don't go away just yet, because we've got, like we said before, the music from Ben Warren. So stay tuned. You can find the show notes for this page and lots of Clive Barker news and features at www.clivebarkercast.com. Leave comments there or get them directly into the podcast by clicking the Send Voicemail tab on the right. Please follow us on Twitter at BarkerCast or at Occupy Midian. Like us on Facebook and join the Occupy Midian Facebook group. You can listen on the site or subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Libsyn, TuneIn, Pocket Cast, Google Play, and Double Twist. Subscribe to our YouTube channel as well. Please take a couple of minutes to leave us a review on iTunes. It means the world to us and helps us spread the word about Clive Barker. The Clive Barker Podcast, or BarkerCast, is an independent editorial fan site and podcast that is not affiliated with or under contract by Clive Barker or Seraphim Films. This is a labor of love by the fans for the fans.
Thanks for listening.